I am 32 years old, a woman who believed her marriage was a partnership. My husband, Mark, and I had built a life together over a decade. We had a home, a successful business that I had poured my own inheritance into, and what I thought was a foundation of respect. That foundation crumbled on a Tuesday evening, over a dinner of lemon chicken I had spent an hour preparing. It was my mother's recipe, his favorite. He barely touched it. He just stared at me, his eyes cold and distant, a stranger sitting in the chair he had occupied for 10 years. "Lena, we need to talk," he said. His voice was flat, rehearsed. It was the voice he used with underperforming employees right before he fired them. "I can see that, Mark. You have not said a word since you came home," I replied, setting my fork down. My appetite had vanished. A knot of dread was tightening in my stomach. "Things are going to change around here," he continued, ignoring my comment. He pushed his plate away. "There is someone else in my life. Her name is Chloe." The name hung in the air between us. Chloe. It sounded young, bubbly. It sounded like everything I was not, after years of working 60-hour weeks beside him to build our company. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I kept my expression neutral. I had learned long ago that showing emotion to Mark was like showing a predator a weakness. "I see," I said. The words felt like sand in my mouth. "And what does this mean for us?" He leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the polished oak of our dining table. A table I had picked out, paid for. "It means I want to be with her. But I also do not want to destroy what we have built. This house, the business. A divorce would be messy, financially ruinous." I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was not a confession. It was a negotiation. "So, what are you proposing?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. He finally met my eyes, and what I saw there was not guilt or sadness. It was a chilling sort of resolve. "Chloe is going to be moving in. She is having a hard time right now, and she needs support. She needs a stable environment." I blinked. I must have heard him wrong. "Moving in? Here? Into our home?" "Yes," he said, as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. "And I expect you to be welcoming. I expect you to help her get settled. You will cook, you will clean, you will treat her as a guest in our home. You will serve her needs until she is back on her feet." The word serve was a slap in the face. It was meant to be. He was not just telling me about his affair. He was demanding I participate in my own humiliation. He wanted me to be a maid to his mistress, in my own home, a home bought with my family's money. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it almost made me laugh. "And if I refuse?" I asked, the question a thin, brittle thread. He shrugged, a gesture of supreme indifference. "Then you can leave. You can walk out with whatever you can fit in your car. But I will make sure the divorce is long and painful and that you get nothing. I will tell everyone you were unstable, that you abandoned the marriage. I will paint you as the villain, Lena. And people will believe me. They always do." He was right about that. Mark was charming, charismatic. He was the public face of our company. I was the quiet one, the one who managed the books and the logistics, the one who did the work that no one saw. He had spent years cultivating an image of the perfect husband, burdened by a difficult, moody wife. It was a slow poison he had been feeding to our friends and even my own family for years. I looked at him, at this man I had loved, this man I had trusted with my dreams and my future. And I saw him for what he truly was, a parasite, cloaked in a designer suit. The dread in my stomach was gone, replaced by something cold and hard and sharp. It was rage, but a quiet, patient kind of rage. He was waiting for me to scream, to cry, to throw my plate at him. He was waiting for the emotional outburst that would prove his narrative. The unstable wife. The hysterical woman. I would not give him the satisfaction. Instead, I did something he did not expect. I smiled. It was not a real smile. It was a baring of teeth. It was a promise. It was the first move in a game he did not even know we were playing. He stared at me, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He had expected tears. He had prepared for a fight. He had not prepared for this quiet, unsettling calm. "All right, Mark," I said, my voice smooth as glass. "If that is what you want, she can move in." His confusion turned to smug satisfaction. He thought he had won. He thought I was weak, broken, willing to accept any scrap of a life he was willing to offer me. He thought my smile was one of defeat. He was wrong. My smile was a declaration of war. He had just handed me my weapon, time. And I was going to use every second of it to dismantle his world, piece by piece. He leaned back in his chair, a triumphant smirk on his face. "I knew you would be reasonable, Lena. It is for the best. You will see. Chloe is a wonderful person. You might even like her." I just kept smiling. "I am sure I will," I said. He had no idea what was coming, and I was going to enjoy every moment of his downfall. The next day, Mark announced that Chloe would be arriving in the evening. He instructed me to prepare the guest room, the one with the en-suite bathroom and the view of the garden. My mother had stayed in that room whenever she visited. The thought of this other woman sleeping in that bed, using my mother's favorite towels, made my stomach churn. But I complied, my face a mask of placid obedience. I stripped the bed, put on the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets that Mark had always complained were an unnecessary extravagance, and placed a vase of fresh flowers on the nightstand. Every action was deliberate, a performance for an audience of one. Mark watched me from the doorway, his arms crossed.
"Good. See?
This does not have to be difficult. We can make this work, for the sake of the business." "Of course, dear," I said, smoothing a non-existent wrinkle on the duvet. "Anything for the business." I felt a grim satisfaction as he nodded, completely oblivious to the sarcasm dripping from my words. He saw what he wanted to see, a submissive wife. I needed to talk to someone. I needed a sanity check. After Mark left for the office, whistling a cheerful tune, I called my best friend, Sarah. We had known each other since college, and she was the only person who knew the truth about my marriage, the little cracks in the perfect facade Mark presented to the world.
"Lena?
You sound strange. Is everything okay?" she asked, her voice filled with immediate concern. I took a deep breath. "Mark has a mistress," I said, the words tasting like ash. "And he is moving her into our house tonight." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then an explosion. "He is what? Are you kidding me? That is not just audacious, that is certifiably insane. You need to leave. Pack your bags and come stay with me right now." "I cannot, Sarah," I said calmly. He gave me an ultimatum. Either I play along and serve her, or I leave with nothing and he ruins me. Serve her? He used that word. Sarah's voice was laced with fury. "Lena, that man is a monster. You cannot stay there. It is not safe." "Physically, I am fine," I reassured her. "But financially, he has me trapped. Or at least he thinks he does." "Sarah," when he told me, I smiled. "You smiled?" she asked, her confusion evident.
"Yes."
And he thought it was because I was giving in. But it was not. It was because I realized he has made a fatal mistake. He is underestimating me. He is bringing the enemy into my territory, and he is giving me time to gather my forces. I am not leaving. I am going to fight. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. She was a lawyer, not in family law, but she was sharp and logical. "Okay," she said finally, her tone shifting from panicked friend to strategic ally. "Okay, I get it. But you need a plan. A real one. What are you going to do?" "First, I need to know what I am dealing with," I said, my mind already racing. "I need to understand their relationship, their plans, and most importantly, our finances." Mark has handled the details of the business finances for years. He always said I should not worry my pretty little head about it. I think it is time I started worrying. "He has locked you out of the accounts?" Sarah asked. "Not all of them. I still have access to our personal joint accounts. But the business accounts, the investment portfolios. He changed the passwords a few months ago. He claimed it was for security purposes. Now I know the real reason." "All right," Sarah said, her voice firm. Your first step is to document everything. Every conversation, every demand he makes. Write it down. Date it. Time it. Your second step is to find a way into those accounts. We need to see where the money is going. And your third step, and this is the most important one, is to find the best divorce attorney in the city. Not just a good one. A shark.
I will make some calls.
Thank you, Sarah, I said, a wave of gratitude washing over me. I knew I could count on you. Always, she replied. Now go be the most accommodating, subservient wife you can be. Make them comfortable. Make them careless. And call me the second she walks through that door. We hung up, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Sarah was right. I needed to play a role. The role of a lifetime. I was no longer Lena, the wife. I was Lena, the strategist, and my home was now a battlefield. That evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Mark standing there, a proprietary arm around a young woman with wide, innocent blue eyes and a cascade of blonde hair. She looked barely out of her teens. This was Chloe. She was clutching a single, expensive-looking suitcase. Mark was beaming, as if he were presenting a prize he had won. Lena, this is Chloe, he said, his voice full of false bonhomie. Chloe, this is my wife, Lena. Chloe gave me a small, hesitant smile. It is so nice to finally meet you, she said, her voice soft and sweet. Mark has told me so much about you. Has he now? I said, my own smile perfectly pleasant. Welcome to our home. Please come in. I stepped back, holding the door open. They walked in, Chloe looking around with an air of wonder, Mark looking at me with an expression of smug approval. He thought I was beaten. He thought he was in complete control. The game had just begun, and he had already lost. He just did not know it yet. I closed the door behind them, the click of the latch sounding like the cocking of a gun. The first few days were a masterclass in self-control. I cooked them gourmet meals. I made sure Chloe's room was always pristine. I smiled politely when she praised my cooking, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension that made my skin crawl. She would say things like, "Oh, Lena, you are just a marvel in the kitchen. I can barely boil water. Mark is so lucky to have someone to take care of him like this." Mark would preen, lapping up the praise. "Lena has always been a wonderful homemaker," he would say, as if I had not co-founded the company that paid for the very food on our plates. They were careless, convinced of my submission. They would hold hands at the dinner table. Mark would kiss her goodnight at the door of her room, a lingering, theatrical kiss for my benefit. I would simply nod, wish them both a good night, and retreat to my own bedroom, the master suite they had not yet dared to breach. My bed felt cold and empty, but my mind was on fire. Each night, after they were asleep, my real work began. I started with our joint accounts. I downloaded years of statements, meticulously combing through every transaction. It was tedious, but I was determined. I was looking for a pattern, an anomaly, anything that could give me a clue as to where the money was going. For the first few nights, I found nothing out of the ordinary. Mortgages, utilities, groceries, the occasional lavish dinner that Mark had claimed was a business expense. But then I found it. A recurring monthly payment to a holding company I had never heard of. It was not a huge amount, just a few $1,000s a month, enough to fly under the radar. But it had been going on for almost 2 years. My heart started to beat faster. I did a quick search for the company name. It was registered to a post office box in another state. It was a ghost. A shell corporation. This was it. This was the beginning of the trail. I needed more. I needed access to the business accounts. I tried guessing the new passwords. Anniversaries, birthdays, pet names. Nothing worked. He had been clever. But Mark had one weakness, his ego. He believed he was smarter than everyone, especially me. And that made him predictable. I thought about his habits. He had a small, locked safe in his office where he kept important documents. I had never known the combination. He had always told me it was for sensitive work files. I had never questioned it. Now, I was certain the information I needed was inside. Getting into the safe was a challenge. I could not just break it open. He would know. I needed to be smarter. I watched him. I noticed that he always opened it first thing in the morning, right after his shower, before he came down for breakfast. He was a man of routine. And routine was a weakness I could exploit. I bought a tiny, motion-activated camera, the kind used as a nanny cam, and I hid it in a bookshelf in his office, perfectly positioned to have a clear view of the safe. It was a huge risk. If he found it, my entire plan would be exposed. But I was past the point of caution. I was a gambler betting everything on a single hand. The next morning, I held my breath as I heard the shower turn off upstairs. I waited, my ears straining. I heard his footsteps move into the office. I imagined the tiny camera whirring to life, its lens capturing the secret I so desperately needed. I had to force myself to stay in the kitchen, calmly making coffee, my hands shaking slightly as I scooped the grounds into the filter. When he came downstairs, he was smiling. "Morning," he said, kissing Chloe on the cheek as she sat at the kitchen island. "Something smells good." "Just coffee," I said, my voice steady. "And I was about to make omelets. Your favorite."
He beamed at me.
"See, Chloe? What did I tell you? Lena is taking this all so well. She is a team player." I smiled back at him, a predator's smile. "Anything for the team," I said. Later that day, after they had both left for the office, I retrieved the camera. My hands trembled as I plugged it into my laptop. I fast-forwarded through the footage until I saw him walk into frame. He moved with a casual confidence, completely unaware of my betrayal of his trust, a perfect mirror of his own. He knelt before the safe, his back to the camera. For a heart-stopping moment, I thought his body would block the view. But then he shifted and I saw it. His fingers, moving with practiced ease over the keypad. I played it back, frame by frame, zooming in, writing down the numbers. 6 digits. The birth date of his company. Of course. His real baby. I took a deep breath and walked into his office, closing the door behind me. I knelt in front of the safe, my heart pounding. I entered the 6 digits. The lock clicked open. Inside were several folders. I opened the top one. It was labeled Chloe. My blood ran cold. It was not just financial documents. It was a plan. A detailed, step-by-step plan to divest me of my shares in the company, to leverage my inheritance against a fabricated debt, and to leave me with absolutely nothing. There were emails between Mark and his lawyer, discussing strategies. There were notes in Mark's handwriting, outlining how to provoke me into an emotional outburst that he could use against me in court. But that was not the worst of it. The worst was a signed agreement between Mark and Chloe. It promised her a 20% stake in the company and the deed to our house, free and clear, upon the finalization of our divorce. It was dated 6 months ago. This was not a new development. This had been in the works for a long time. And then I saw the other folder. It was labeled with the name of the Shell Corporation. I opened it. Inside were bank statements. And they showed more than just the few $1,000s a month from our joint account. They showed massive transfers from our business accounts. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. He was not just funding her lifestyle. He was systematically draining our company. He was committing fraud on a massive scale. I felt a dizzying wave of nausea and rage. This was not just infidelity. This was a cold, calculated conspiracy to destroy me. He had not just broken my heart. He had tried to break my spirit, my future, my entire life. I took out my phone, and I photographed every single document. Every page, every signature, every damning number. I uploaded them to a secure cloud server, one he could never access. I put the folders back exactly as I had found them, closed the safe, and spun the dial. When I walked out of that office, I was a different woman. The hurt was still there, a dull ache in my chest. But it was overshadowed by a white-hot, purifying anger. He had wanted to paint me as the villain. He had no idea what a villain I could be. My smile was no longer just a promise of war. It was a guarantee of his annihilation. My next call was to Sarah. I did not waste time with pleasantries. "I am in," I said. I got into the safe. "You what?" she exclaimed. "Lena, how?" Never mind, do not tell me. What did you find? Everything, I said, my voice low and intense. It is worse than we thought. He is not just cheating. He is embezzling. He has been funneling money from the business into a shell corporation for years. And he has a written agreement with Chloe to give her a piece of the company and the house after he gets rid of me. Sarah was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was grim. This is not a divorce case anymore, Lena. This is a criminal case. You have him. You have him dead to rights. I know, I said. I have pictures of everything. Bank statements, the agreement, emails with his lawyer. Okay, she said, her lawyer brain kicking into high gear. Do not do anything yet. Do not let him know that you know.
We need to be smart about this.
I am sending you the name of the attorney I found. His name is Mr. Peterson. He is not just a shark, he is a great white. He specializes in high-conflict, high-asset divorces with elements of corporate fraud. He is expensive, but worth every penny. Call him. Set up a consultation. And Lena? Yes. Be careful. You are dealing with a cornered animal, and they are at their most dangerous when they think they are winning. I ended the call and looked at the name she had sent me. Mr. Peterson. I made the appointment for the following day, using a burner phone I had purchased for cash. I could not risk Mark seeing the call on our shared phone records. That night at dinner, I was the perfect hostess. I served roast chicken, Chloe's favorite. She had mentioned it a few days prior. I listened as she chattered on about her day, about the new yoga studio she had joined, about the expensive handbag she had seen in a boutique window. Mark encouraged her, telling her to go ahead and buy it. You deserve a treat, he said, smiling at her fondly. I watched them, my expression serene, my mind a whirlwind of calculations. They were spending my money, the money I had invested, the money I had worked for. The rage burned inside me, but I channeled it into a cold, hard resolve. I would let them have their little fantasy for a little while longer. I would let them believe they were in control. The higher they climbed, the harder they would fall. The next day, I met with Mr. Peterson. His office was in a sleek, downtown skyscraper with panoramic views of the city. He was an older man, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I laid out the story, from the ultimatum to the contents of the safe. I showed him the photos on my phone. He listened without interruption, his face impassive. When I was finished, he steepled his fingers and looked at me over the top of his glasses. Mr. Mark is both arrogant and foolish, he said, his voice a low rumble. He has documented his own crime. This is not a divorce. This is a liquidation. We will not just be filing for divorce. We will be filing a civil suit for fraud and embezzlement. We will file an injunction to freeze all business and personal assets, including the Shell Corporation. He will not be able to touch a single penny without a court order. The relief was so profound it almost brought me to tears. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. What about Chloe? I asked. Her signed agreement makes her a co-conspirator, he said grimly. She is liable. We will be naming her in the suit as well. They thought they were building a future together. Instead, they were building a prison. He outlined the plan. He would prepare the filings secretly. We would wait for the perfect moment to strike. He advised me to continue playing my role at home. Let him get comfortable, he said. The more comfortable he is, the more mistakes he will make. I left his office feeling empowered. The fear and helplessness that had plagued me for weeks had been replaced by a sense of impending justice. The game was set. The pieces were in place. All I had to do was wait for the right time to say, checkmate. My opportunity came sooner than I expected. Mark's mother, Eleanor, was having her 70th birthday. She was a woman who worshipped her son and had only ever treated me with thinly veiled contempt. She saw me as an obstacle, a necessary inconvenience for her darling boy to get access to my family's money. She was Mark's biggest enabler, constantly praising his business acumen while dismissing my contributions. She was having a large, catered party at her country club. The entire family and all of their influential friends would be there. Mark announced, a week before the party, that he would be bringing Chloe. As my partner, he said, daring me to object. It is time people got used to the new reality. Of course, I said sweetly. But what will I be? The hired help. He laughed, a cruel, barking sound. Do not be so dramatic, Lena. You will be there, as my wife.
For now.
We have to keep up appearances. For mother's sake.
It was perfect.
A public forum, surrounded by the people whose opinions they valued most. It was the stage I needed for my final act. I spent the next week in a state of heightened focus. I continued to play the part of the dutiful wife, all while coordinating with Mr. Peterson. The injunctions were ready. The lawsuit was drafted. All it needed was my final go-ahead. The night of the party, I took extra care with my appearance. I wore a simple, elegant black dress, a stark contrast to the flashy, sequin number Chloe had chosen. She looked like a cheap imitation of a wealthy woman. I looked like I owned the room. When we arrived, Eleanor rushed to greet us. She hugged Mark tightly, then turned to Chloe, clasping her hands. Chloe, my dear, you look absolutely stunning. Mark has told me all about you. Welcome to the family. She completely ignored me, as if I were invisible. It was the final confirmation I needed. She was not just an enabler. She was an active participant in their scheme. Her approval gave Mark the confidence to be so brazen. The party was in full swing. Mark paraded Chloe around, introducing her to his business associates and family friends as his dear friend. The whispers followed them around the room. People were not stupid. They knew what was happening. But no one said anything. They just gave me pitying looks, which I returned with a serene smile. I waited until it was time for the toasts. Mark, of course, was the first to speak. He stood up, champagne glass in hand, and delivered a gushing tribute to his mother. He spoke of her strength, her guidance, and her unwavering support. He ended by saying, "And I am so happy to be able to share this moment not just with my family, but with someone who has brought so much joy into my life recently." To my mother, and to new beginnings, he raised his glass and looked directly at Chloe, who blushed and beamed at him. The room was thick with uncomfortable silence. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for my reaction. This was it. This was my moment. I stood up, my own glass in hand. "I would also like to propose a toast," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying across the silent room. Mark looked at me, a flash of annoyance in his eyes. He expected me to make a scene, to embarrass myself. To Eleanor, I began, raising my glass to my mother-in-law, who looked at me with suspicion. "You have always been a fierce protector of this family, and, more importantly, a protector of the family's assets. You taught Mark to be a savvy businessman, to always look for an opportunity, and to be ruthless in his pursuits." Eleanor smiled, preening at the compliment. Mark relaxed, a smug look on his face. He thought I was finally falling in line. And in that spirit, I continued, my voice taking on a harder edge, "I would like to announce a new business venture. It is a joint venture between my husband, Mark, and his partner, Chloe." The room went completely still. Chloe's smile faltered. Mark's eyes narrowed. "Lena, what are you doing?" he hissed. I ignored him, turning to address the guests. "You see, for the past 2 years, Mark has been very busy. He started a new company, a little shell corporation. And with Chloe's help, he has managed to transfer over $500,000 from our shared business into this new venture. A truly impressive act of creative accounting." A collective gasp went through the room. Eleanor's face went pale. Mark was on his feet now, his face a mask of fury. "That is a lie. She is hysterical. I told you she was unstable." "Am I?" I asked calmly. I took my phone out of my purse. "Because I have the bank statements right here. The transfers. The account numbers. And I also have this." I held up the phone, displaying a crystal-clear image of the agreement between Mark and Chloe, the one promising her my house and my shares of our company. "This is an agreement signed by both Mark and Chloe, outlining their plan to defraud me and the company we built together. A company, I might add, that was started with a significant investment from my own inheritance. The room erupted in murmurs. People were staring at Mark and Chloe, their expressions a mixture of shock and disgust. "And Chloe," I said, turning my attention to her. She looked like a trapped animal. "It turns out our Chloe is quite the entrepreneur herself. It seems this is not her first partnership with a wealthy, married man. I have here a sworn affidavit from her last business partner. He tells a very similar story. It seems her business model is less about partnership and more about predation." Chloe let out a small sob and buried her face in her hands. I turned back to Mark. He was staring at me, his face white with rage and disbelief. He had never imagined I was capable of this. He had seen me as a doormat, not a strategist. "You gave me an ultimatum, Mark," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, but in the silent room, every word was a thunderclap. "You told me to serve your mistress, or leave with nothing. Well, I have made my choice. I will not be serving anyone, but I will be taking everything. My lawyers filed a lawsuit for fraud and an injunction to freeze all of your assets an hour ago. You cannot touch a single dollar. The business, the house, the accounts, it is all frozen, pending a criminal investigation." Eleanor made a choking sound. Her perfect party, her perfect son, her perfect reputation, all ruined in a matter of minutes. I looked at Mark, at the man who had tried to destroy me, and for the first time in a very long time, I gave him a real smile. A smile of pure, unadulterated victory. "So, a toast," I said, raising my glass high. "To new beginnings."
Mine.
I downed the champagne in one go, set the glass down with a decisive click, and walked out of the room, leaving the smoldering ruins of their lives behind me. I did not look back. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The injunction hit Mark like a tidal wave. His credit cards were declined. His access to the business accounts was severed. The world he had built, funded by my money and my labor, evaporated overnight. The news of the scandal spread like wildfire through their social circle and the local business community. The story of the jilted wife turning the tables on her fraudulent husband and his con artist mistress was far too juicy to remain a secret. The first call I received was from a sputtering, furious Mark. He left a voicemail, as I had no intention of ever speaking to him directly again. It was a tirade of threats and insults, blaming me for ruining his life. He called me vindictive, crazy, and a liar. Listening to it, I felt nothing but a profound sense of detachment. His words were the impotent rage of a dethroned king. He had no power over me anymore. I forwarded the voicemail to Mr. Peterson, who simply replied, "Excellent. More evidence for the harassment claim." The second call was from Eleanor. She was crying. It was not the sincere grief of a mother whose son had lost his way. It was the panicked wailing of a woman whose social standing was in flames. "Lena, you have to stop this," she sobbed into the phone. "You are destroying this family. Think of the shame. What will people say?" "They will say the truth, Eleanor," I replied, my voice devoid of warmth. "They will say that your son is a thief and a cheat, and that you stood by and watched him do it. Perhaps they will even say you encouraged him." "I never," she shrieked. "I only wanted my son to be happy." "Happy at my expense?" I asked. "Happy with my money?" "You were happy to welcome his mistress into my home. You were happy to see me humiliated. Your concern is not for this family, Eleanor. It is for your reputation. And you are right to be concerned. You hitched your wagon to a falling star." "But what about the business?" she pleaded. "It will be ruined. Everything we worked for." "Everything I worked for," I corrected her. "And, do not worry. The business will be fine. Once the cancerous parts are removed, it will be healthier than ever." I hung up on her sobs. I felt no pity. She had made her choice long ago, and now she was facing the consequences. Chloe simply vanished. Once the lawsuit was filed, and her name was made public, she disappeared. Mr. Peterson's investigator discovered she had cleared out her apartment and likely left the state. She was a ghost in the wind, leaving Mark to face the music alone. I almost felt a flicker of sympathy for her, another victim of Mark's manipulations. But then I remembered the signed agreement, her smug smiles at my dinner table, and the affidavit from her previous victim. She was not a victim. She was a predator just like him. They deserved each other. My life, in contrast, began to open up. The court appointed a receiver to manage the business during the legal proceedings, an impartial third party who quickly saw the truth of the situation. He saw my meticulous bookkeeping from the early years and the chaotic, fraudulent mess Mark had made of the accounts more recently.
He saw my value.
He began consulting me on all major decisions. For the first time, I was being treated as the co-founder and majority partner that I was. Sarah was my rock through it all. We had a celebratory dinner the week after the party. I have to admit, she said, raising her wine glass, I was worried. When you told me you were going to stay, I thought you were making a huge mistake. I thought he would break you. He almost did, I admitted. But he pushed me too far. That ultimatum, it was a gift. It woke me up. It showed me that there was nothing left to save. He did not want a wife. He wanted a doormat with a bank account. Well, he definitely got more than he bargained for, she said with a grin. I saw Eleanor at the grocery store yesterday. She looked like she had aged 10 years. She tried to hide behind a display of organic kale. We both laughed, a real, genuine laugh. It felt good. The legal battle was long, but it was not difficult. The evidence was overwhelming. Mark's attempts to paint me as unstable were laughable in the face of his documented fraud. His lawyer, seeing the mountain of evidence against his client, pushed for a settlement. Mr. Peterson was ruthless in his negotiations. He did not just want to make me whole. He wanted to make a point. The final settlement was a masterpiece of legal destruction. I was awarded a 75% stake in the business, reflecting my initial investment and my years of sweat equity. The house, which had been purchased with my inheritance, was signed over to me completely. Mark was forced to pay back every dollar he had embezzled, with interest. He had to sell his stocks, his car, and his precious watch collection to cover the debt. He was left with a minority share in the company, not enough to have any say in its operations, but just enough that he would have to watch from the sidelines as I made it more successful than he ever could have. He was also left with a mountain of legal bills and a reputation that was utterly destroyed. He was a social and professional pariah. The last I heard, he was living in a small, rented apartment on the other side of town. The new beginning he had toasted so proudly at his mother's party was not quite what he had envisioned. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting in my office, the one that used to be his, looking out over the city. The business was thriving under my sole leadership. I had promoted talented people, implemented new ideas, and the company was more profitable than ever.
My phone rang.
It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Lena? The voice was weak, hesitant. It was Mark. I said nothing. I just wanted to say, I am sorry, he stammered. I know it is too late. I know I messed up. I was a fool. I lost everything. I thought about all the pain he had caused me. The sleepless nights, the humiliation, the betrayal. I thought about his cold eyes as he gave me his ultimatum. And I felt nothing.
No anger, no sadness.
Just a vast, empty distance. He was a stranger, a ghost from a past life. Yes, you did, I said, my voice calm and even. You lost everything. And I found everything. I think we are done here. I hung up before he could reply. I blocked his number. That evening, Sarah came over to the house. We sat in the garden, the one I had so carefully tended over the years, drinking wine as the sun set. To you, she said, raising her glass. To the smartest, strongest woman I know. To freedom, I replied, clinking my glass against hers. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the peace. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a sanctuary. My sanctuary. I thought back to that night, the night he told me to serve his mistress or leave. He thought he was giving me two choices, both of which led to my defeat. But he was wrong. He had given me a third choice. The choice to fight back. The choice to become the person I was always meant to be. He had wanted me to serve her. He had wanted me to be small, to be obedient, to accept my own erasure. But in trying to break me, he had forged me into something stronger. He had taught me the true meaning of power. And for that, in a strange, ironic way, I was almost grateful. He had handed me the keys to my own kingdom, and all I had to do was walk through the door. The smile I gave him that night was a promise. And it was a promise I had kept. He had learned, in the most public and painful way possible, what it felt like to be served. He was served justice. He was served consequences. And I was served a new life, built on the ashes of the old one. And it was a life that was entirely, completely, and gloriously my own.